Welcome to another episode of the Ecommerce podcast. This one you should listen to if you're selling or moving anything from A to B, or if you need a bigger understanding of your e-commerce supply chain. Many SMEs are struggling. They're too small to know it all, let alone do it all. On this podcast, we have Justice. He's a CEO of NEX, Neutral E-commerce Experience, a platform bringing all the pieces together in an integrated supply chain. Tune in for more. All right, welcome, Justice, on this episode. Actually, to me, you are very inspiring, very energetic, and I'm a little bit jealous of what you're doing to actually build an integrated supply chain. It's something that I'm very passionate about myself as well. So I'm very honored to have you here on this podcast. And obviously, it's not just you, it's your whole team that is making Next a success. But can you share a little bit more about your background with e-commerce supply chain?
Well, yeah, thanks, Simon. First, thanks all for having me. I think you guys are doing a great job. Everything that I'm seeing so far and hearing on the podcast from you guys is excellent. Obviously, you just have been with us on our annual event in Hong Kong and shared the stage, spoken at panels. I'm very grateful for that. Thank you very much. Yeah, my background. It all started for me in customs compliance. I've after done my dual study in retail, I went over to by coincidence really into the customs compliance sector, and then from there I got a chance to have running the customs compliance division for all imports from Amazon Europe in Luxembourg, and there I learned a lot about cross-border e-commerce, about classifications, about BTIs, customs rules, everything that you can think of, smarter inventory programs, the whole thing. Based on that, then, when I left that position, I've co-founded a company called Ship to Prime. It's now not operating anymore under that company name because we sold it to a Chinese partner. But it's basically what we did in early 2019. We did found a platform for Chinese and American sellers that wanted to ship directly into any Amazon FC in Europe and the UK. And we did build it fully automated so that you can get your compliance check done, your shipping rates, and your booking without even interfering with a human individual. So that was operating 24/7. We've implemented a WeChat help desk, etc., with Chinese and Mandarin speaking staff. Even in the end, had Cantonese speaking staff to be more specific, also for Hong Kong. And that did work out well in some sectors. We were a bit too early for the time in time, and we also had some regulatory issues, some down the way. But in general, that was how I went into e-commerce supply chain. Before that, I left something. I was involved in global freight forwarding, which certainly helped to get a better understanding also on the logistics side of things. But mainly my background is in customs, and as we all know, still today on cross-border e-commerce, customs is always the bottleneck.
Yeah, that was a big takeaway on customs, data, compliancy, having sure that everyone has access to the same kind of information. And it shows your background has been very diverse when it comes to different pieces of the supply chain that's necessary. And I guess that's created as well what you guys are doing now, because Next got created for a reason. What is the industry problem that you are trying to solve?
Yeah, basically there are two things. So first of all, when we started it, we wanted to have setting up a global network or an alliance really of local heroes in cross-border e-commerce. That could be brokers, fulfillment operators, but also last mile operators and airlines, because there wasn't any. So we had those connections in local ones or continental ones. Maybe you had some between Europe and the US or Europe and China, but you never really had a global one. At least we couldn't find anyone. So we thought that was the first need that we wanted to build. And while building that, we figured out we need to have the tech support as well to give our members the ability to move that from a tax perspective. Along the way, we were contacted by SMEs from the retail industry that were having the same issues as the logistics providers by finding the right partner. So let's say the need that we were seeing that the SME retailers are having is pretty simple. If they want to expand to a foreign continent or to a new market, the usual model would be they're going with a local marketplace that is a leading one to present the product, right? And then they would go with the logistics services that the marketplace is offering. But they have two issues with that, and which they hate. And one is the total lack of visibility. So they don't know in the supply chain who is doing what, because they only see and getting the events that the marketplace is providing to them. And the second one is they know they get ripped off. Right, so they're paying top dollar just because it's so easy, and they're getting the functional service of the marketplace. So the need that we're solving is that we giving a neutral alternative to that. And by neutral, I mean really neutral. We're not touching the freight. We're just being, if you want to have it that way, the connector platform in between. And we're not separating us from the competition is that we're not engaging with the top four express carriers, but not just for the last mile. But we're bringing the e-tailer together with everyone across the supply chain, single by single, and they have full visibility of who's performing what.
Yeah, that's a big challenge because you have these postal events, you have these air freight events, and they're all tied together at some point because there is an air freight movement in e-commerce most of the time, and there is a last mile delivery, and there is a custom clearance, but all these pieces, all these steps, they're run by independent companies. There's hardly anyone that is running at the full supply chain by themselves, other than maybe a DHL or UPS, but they also not winning at this moment because they have so many assets that they have to take care of. So you're kind of creating a light asset mode model, I would say, with NEX.
Yeah, true. And then, of course, it only works if the local partner is also willing to invest into the right IT setup or has the capabilities of investing into it, because it only works if you have a simple integration part, right? If it's not working, you still can be part of the alliance because you can offer your services to the other network partner around the globe if they are in need of a local champion or a local hero. That's totally fine. But the majority will need to invest into it. And we are basically the party that sets the standards for it, right? So we engaging with our founding members to set the certain standards of events, of the ethical protocol, of the way that we want to move forward. Because the only way that we can make it a success, as you said, it's a huge task. The airline has a completely different interest than the last mile provider or the customs operator. The fulfillment company only wants to get in the stock in and out. It's a complete task. So that's why we putting someone from every sector to set those values and to set the direction for it. Because otherwise, it will be impossible for us to scale it up.
Yeah, these KPIs, that's a very important thing, that there's such a difference, a misalignment on KPIs for all these individual stakeholders. Therefore, everyone is chasing something else and sometimes even conflicting. And that's just the reality. But in the end, it should be one supply chain. And then but nobody's able to measure it, I guess, from beginning till end. Therefore, you measure your piece and you create targets for that piece of the puzzle. But it's not going to help anyone else before and after you do your service.
Exactly. And that's why we need to set the standards, and then the players that want to be part of it, they need to commit to it. Because I need to have the full visibility for the clients. I can't have for the members. I can't really have the supply chain and the middle gap is lacking because the airline doesn't want to provide it. That's not how it works. Then they can't be part of the alliance. It's as simple as that. And we need to dictate the KPIs and the events that we want to show, and also the quantity of it. Because as you rightly said, there are some players who want to have 210 events, and the other one only wants to have 80, right? And if you're not committing to the same, then it's who's paying for my storage data, and how do I manage the compliance of that data? So it's really necessary that we're engaging with our members to set those rules, and but we're in a good way, and we're growing, making small steps every quarter, and now we will separating the different business units or business pillars to standalone operating units so that they can easier be scaled up, still work as a whole.
So you were just at this great event in Hong Kong, and there's going to be a next one in Istanbul, I think next year, September. But what is your main takeaway from this event in Hong Kong? And also, how are you going to do it differently in Istanbul? Or if you can say something about that already.
Well, first of all, it's only 90% clear that we have it in Istanbul because the contract is not signed yet. It might be, but it will be in Europe or Turkey anyways. That's for sure. My key takeaways are, and we exactly achieved what we wanted to achieve. We brought everyone across the supply chain together, starting with the manufacturer, going via marketplaces and the logistics operators in that field, bringing in e-tailers, having airlines on board, and having logistics companies on board, as well as tech. That was very important. We got some local governmental bodies as well, because without them, it is impossible to set up an operating alliance that is accepted. Right, so we're trying to partner with many as we can from the governmental side and associations. Now, key takeaway is that really made a difference. The second one was that we only allowed C-levels to sign up for the event. No matter, well, if it's a huge companies like I don't know, a Shein or Temu or whatnot, then they would allow to bring a VP level as well. But if it's everything up to, I would say probably we did set like a step was €1 billion in US dollars in turnover. Everything below that was only allowed to bring a C-level. Because simply we didn't want it to have you as an attendance having the same conversations again in 2 weeks' time with their line manager or with their C-level or whatever. Plus, it's a rather expensive event to attend. We only want to do top-notch events at top-notch sites. And the reason for that is simple. We do believe if it's for free or very cheap to come, then the companies are not putting any efforts into it. The same applies for our membership. If you want to be part of the alliance, as it is restricted and limited per vertical per area, it needs to be having a certain value. And you need to invest into the IT side as well, because otherwise there's no point of being in there. You will send a junior sales manager, and then next year you will say, I didn't get anything out of it. And then you're not renewing your membership. And the vertical membership for that side was blocked for a year. Would not be fair for us. It would not be fair for the other members. So that's why we kind of making it quite exclusive.
Yeah, makes sense. So sales guys collecting business cards is never the event you want to be at. You already mentioned you have experience building a supply chain out of Asia, or I think in China you mentioned. So what did that look like, and what was the most difficult part of building that supply chain back in the day?
The most difficult part was certainly not the tech, but rather the compliance side. Helping or trying to make the Asian sellers understand about European compliance and trade rules and everything that they cannot do and that you're not accepting, and trying to convince them not to ship a product if the compliance rules are not been taken care of. That was by far the biggest challenge. And then back then in 2019, we didn't really have an option of Chinese locals to pay for all the supply chain, because they were not able to do international banking transfers. So we had to find a solution of making use of Alipay and WeChat Pay and the local everything related to union banking in China. That was difficult, and then we were very unlucky back then, as we were only founding one company in Central Europe that was dealing with it. And that was Wirecard. And then we had, and I don't know if you heard about that scandal with Wirecard, but then only half a year later, it went bust. It's probably the biggest economic crime in German history. We used their services as a transaction to WeChat and Alipay. But look it up after the podcast episode. It's a crime scene. I think the CEO or the CFO is still on the run. So but anyway, going back, long story short, the compliance bit and the payment bit was the challenge. The technical part was fairly easy, I would say. Amazon was fairly easy to integrate with if you know who to talk to, and if you know the system works with the SPN program, etc. If you know how much detail they put into the FBA program, then you know how to handle it. But you need to have the expertise before you're getting started.
So it's mainly Chinese sellers selling on Amazon, and you facilitating the cross-border payments, the compliancy, and the movement of the goods.
Yeah, basically we did everything. So they were delivering their product to a warehouse or fulfillment center in China or in Southeast Asia. Our partner would collect it, consolidate it, and ship it either by air or ocean to Europe, and we taking care of the rest of the inbound clearance, the delivery into the Amazon FC, and even the rebound. There was stage 2 to getting the reverse logistics. Kind of, it was not really reverse, but it was getting returns in for those sellers if the product wasn't sold on Amazon, rather than burning it. It was a bit depending on the value of the goods, of course, and the agreements that you had with the clients. It was more individual requests for the returns. But the US sellers, for example, they had a higher interest of getting their stuff returned if it wasn't sold, or then ship it to another party, to another platform's warehouse like eBay or whatnot, getting into that. So I would say the biggest one, I wouldn't say, I can tell you from numbers, the biggest income that we have was on the shipping and customs side, but then second of all was the returns by doing pick and pack again and reshipping it out. Plus, it was easy because we were controlling our own logistics consolidation out of Asia.
Yeah, that makes sense. So this was a few years ago. So fast forward to today, how is that supply chain now different what you were dealing with back then?
I would say the biggest difference is now some of the sellers got a better understanding how important trade compliance is. Not all of them certainly, and not the majority, but some of them. But definitely the biggest change is making the use of algorithm for predictions. So if you that starts with a product description to selling your stuff online, to making seasonal predictions of goods you should sell, to supply chain interruptions on you name it, crisis or based on historic data. What could be a delay in the shipment if you ship it from on a certain trade lane on day X, then what could be the predicted timeline to achieve it into port? Prediction on customs use. If I'm shipping a certain product to a certain country throughout a certain customs office, what are the chances that it gets stopped or reevaluated? This has changed a lot over the last 4 years, and we see a dramatic change, and we've by far not seen the end of this so far at the moment.
It's interesting. I've been active in custom clearance since 2015. And then there was already an issue on data compliancy, having clear descriptions, valuation, all that sort of stuff. That actually drove me to be where I am today at Ecommerce. It's actually starting with the source. So the source is there are goods in a warehouse, somebody's packing it, and then handing it over to someone else and having access to the accurate data. Having access to what is actually the real product and what is the real value, what's the purchase value, what's the sales value, and how do you translate that data into something that actually can be used further in the supply chain to create this kind of green flow. That's why I said in the beginning, I'm jealous of what you're doing, because that green flow is actually, I wrote a book about it in 2018 of what that green flow would look like. Because that was something that I'm very passionate about, and it was put into someone else's book. So it's already, for me, a long time in the making, but it's about education, about regulations, about the timing of all of it. So also what we described is there's so many smaller players and other players in the industry. And what I see within a B2C supply chain, there's more like an e-commerce supply chain. It's really fragmented. That means that the smaller players, they also want to secure their position and they want to grow their position. So you kind of compete with each other sometimes as well. So there's also a hesitation to share. How do you think this can be solved, and how is Next going to help solve this?
Well, I think that's exactly what we're trying to be, right? The answer to that, because you need to, if you want to position yourself, either it's a niche or in a certain market, or even if you want to go and become yourself a multinational in any way, what you want to do, there is only one way to achieve it, and that's collaboration, full stop. You need to have the right partner in the right area across the supply chain. And that means, first and foremost, he needs to have the right mindset as you have it. He needs to share certain values that you share, even though you're coming from a complete different area maybe of the world. You need to adapt to that, because otherwise you will be left out and you will never make it out of your niche or of your local experience that you have, if you're even surviving. So you need to have the collab partners, at least one, but you need to have multiple collab partners that sharing the same things as you work for. That should be backed up by an IT solution that is suitable for every site across the supply chain. If you don't have that, it's really difficult to keep up the space, because what we see at the moment is that there is a reason why governmental bodies, like take the UPU for example, there's a reason why the local postal operator is losing or lost half of their parcel volume over the last 3 years, which is insane if you think about it. The main reason for that is because they're not sharing the data with each other. And then even if they do, they're not making use of it and not making the right predictions. They're not using it in a right way to learn from it, even though it's billions of data that they're holding on sets. and they are the only ones that having the right set into the last mile set in the first one, because they're reaching 95% of the population on the planet, right? But there you can see that even there, they are a combined team of local ones, right? So if, it's all local governments, and as long as they don't trust each other and sharing insights, they will not get back that stack, even if they can have as much money as they want. They will not get it back, because the big integrator, they are doing it. Well, not all of them are doing it perfectly right, but they're starting. So we helping solving that problem by bringing that local one in China as an example, together with you as a helper, help them in getting to market with the airline, with the customs broker, etc. And if you guys sharing the data and use it, make correct use of it, and then there is in my perfect view, there's a happy horizon on where you can go towards to. But it's a challenge, but to make it work, you need to go down that path.
So trust, or lack of trust, I guess, is a big one. Governments, the regulatory level. What do you think that it should change? Should there be more rules, less rules, different rules, more checks? What is the direction of advice that you would be giving to, whether it's a government or just to be able to smoothen this supply chain?
I think, first of all, it's completely different from what perspective in the world you're looking at to it, right? So it's due to different setups and purely also basic due to different histories we have on different continents. You can't really have the same regulatories everywhere. But I do think that the different governments like the WCO, the WTO, local regulators need to have or should implement a passport for global trade. That should be the first step to go to. And AI has the potential to really help the governments to put that in place and to have it be a control body to it, that they really can make easy use of it to control the passport. And then everybody that does not want to take part of this passport or denies it or fails to it, there I'm afraid you can only sanction them with more checks, more controls, even though if it's costing you a lot of money and it's not the ideal scenario. But at the moment, I cannot really foresee another option than generating a passport for a trusted free trade, or not free trade, but for trusted trade, and to really sanction those that do not want to be part of that game. But it should be still at the same time seeing the local difficulties that you have. Then it should be completely different for LATAM than it is for Africa and Europe, or and vice versa. So, but if they could come more together, and again, sharing more expertise, coming to a neutral setup where they can set up a neutral passport, that could be an option to go forward that road. And I think that massive marketplaces that are in critics right now, they would support it and tap into it. They have a realistic chance to stay there on the long term.
So with passport, whose passport is that? Because it's the first time I hear about this, so I would like to understand a bit better.
Right. So what you only could do is you need to have those global institutions like the UN that is overseeing the UPU, but you can also have the World Customs Organizations, the World Trade Organization. Those guys can have the power and capability to set up a digital passport for trade, which you basically would have at the moment for the movement of parcels, or for the movement of different things. It's a massive challenge, but it's there. Like if you take the European Union that sets up its own customs rule with the EU Customs Codex, then putting it in together with the US inbound one, and putting it together with local ones from the Arab nations. Again, it's not easy, but you can put several trade regulations that you're putting into a regulatory guidance, or a passport that you need to follow, and that all can be compliant and making the checkboxes by making sure that they check their local shippers. Then you can have a realistic chance to have a basic trade facility. So if China would work with it, because we all know is the majority where the goods are coming from at the moment towards the world, then if they apply to it, and if they can make sure that the Chinese shippers are following the guidance and rules of the importers of the other continents, then you can have a realistic chance of an easy trade flow.
Because that was a difficulty when I was working for a postal company before. Let's say most of them were then logistics operators that were a client, shipping from China to anywhere in the world. They say, okay, please, you cannot send these parcels anymore because we want to blacklist them because the description is not correct, the content is not correct, or whatever the reason was. Then we say, okay, cancel it. But then in the end, that same seller that was behind that logistic company was still selling that product, went to another company and then used their services to ship it out, and it ended up in the same last mile, which was the postal last mile. So even shutting one down didn't mean that you would shut down that seller, so to say. So you have to be really deep into the supply chain to be able to make that passport a successful event, and not looking for the right loophole, which is currently the.
Yeah, that's what I mean, right? It's not an easy task, and you will always have. There's always ways around it. We all know that is if you really want to, you probably can ship everything you like, right? But if you want to be there for a long run, and if you're going for to build a bigger marketplace or a bigger online retail house or whatever, then you need to tap into and making it compliant. And as I said, the machine learning is taking its bit in it, because at the moment, I get the point. It's expensive to fill those compliant rules, even if you only would do a certain product production and description, and you uploaded it. If you don't have the capability of an API upload, you upload it by CSV, and then the postal operator says no because it's not automated enough. You're going to a local player, but this can be all solved in a manner if you having governmental portals which you can use, which are basically free to use because the government has an interest of getting the compliant data, right? So they should make it free of use for e-tailers, for logistics companies to use to generate a compliant and fair trade, basically. But it's a long way, and it can only be done in the politics. But bigger companies, the postal operators and unions, as much as when we're getting there to be a global, truly powerful alliance, should then making some pressure towards the local governments that we have the context to push that. And I'm really happy to see that it's already happening. So I'm seeing bigger companies like Maersk doing it now as a big integrator. Seeing they're partnering with companies like Altana AI in the US, pushing the digital trade passport. WTL was already on it, so it's happening already. And I've just visited a webinar last week, very interesting. Unfortunately, only Western associations and governments were in there, but at least it's a start, right? So, but we need to have a global view on that, and it should be addressed as high as possible. And even if that means that you're addressing that on a UN level, because in the end, it's affecting the global trade, and that should be of interest for everyone.
Which country, region, or institution is now really ahead? Who is now already doing that and leading the way?
At the moment, believe it or not, it's and that's because one reason for that is Brexit as well. Is the UK. So they just did put in place a new import regulatory program, or working closely together with tech companies to get those regulatory and compliance checks done on governmental level. But it's now easier for them because they're now alone again and not need to push that through Brussels. However, they are a very good example of moving forward. And Australia is keeping up next. They're really into that as well. But again, it's only for their territory, which is huge. But on the one side, it's only one government that you need to deal with, right? So it's but those two are really advanced into going into this. Surprisingly, we see a good development in Vietnam, which is and I think that is driven because they're getting more and more factory and manufacturers from China that they're setting their production into Vietnam and see more cross trades as well. So they now seen we need to tap into it. Plus, they got a lot of pressure from the European Union if they want to keep that free trade agreement, they need to be more compliant. So very happy to see for us. We actually will be there end of February next year. We just decided there to meet with local retailer connections and the Chamber of Commerce to make a forum on or a small summit, a one-day summit on where what needs to be achieved. You can also think of it as a workshop. What can be done better to ship easier to Europe and the US?
So how does this sustainability place? That's obviously a very big topic, and I think it's also always one of the topics that also within Next is being covered. How does sustainability and the regulatory, how does that fit in together? Is that still work in progress? Are there really good examples, or actually it is already there?
It's really tough to be fair. So when we had our first founders meeting of NEX, and we discussed what we want to have in the hub, and also what do we want to have at core values, and what should be the members working towards on if they want to retain and part of the alliance. And clearly sustainability was on, I would say, on number 3 on the list of importances. But it is really difficult to set something up that is not ending up as greenwashing, not something that is just a plan because it's easy to say I'm being carbon neutral by 2050 because that's 25 years ahead down the line. So let's just put that out there, and then we will see what way we're making a plan. But then, at least we're getting the green seal and stuff. In short words, I don't really have the answer to that at the moment. I have to be honest. It's because as we're speaking to so many players across the supply chain, it's really difficult. They're all, again, having different challenges. Take the airlines, for example, or even the shipping liners. They cannot do really more than sustainable fuels at the moment. They don't really have another option. And since there is a price war going on between them as well, they really need to make the customer paying for it. Which is then, making it extra more expensive. If you then want to ship your product compliant, you need to pay extra for that as well, because at the moment, if you're using the leading compliance tech companies, they're charging you per compliance check, either per API call or subscription. So the logistics companies will charge you for that as well, or we as an alliance will charge you for that as well. All these coming up to different cost sections to your product, and then you see in 2 ways, right? You know that better than I do. You're either taking away that saving from the marketing budget, or you're saying I may not need to be sustainable in shipping at the moment because let me save that 2 pence per package. Yeah, it's a tough situation, especially for the smaller shippers and the smaller SMEs. It's tough because they really need to invest into it, and they don't even know if it's the right way to the right path to go through when they make an investment to that. So our contribution is we trying to implement a shipping model that will allow you to ship based on CO2 output rather than just on transit time and price. But that is already a challenge that keeping us going for a year. We haven't finished the development of it, even though we're working with the biggest advisory company on that on the planet for sustainability at the moment, Horizon and then South Pole from Switzerland, which is leading in that case, because we do not want to launch that feature if it's not really legit, if you see what I mean. If you don't really get those data, again, coming back to the data, if you don't really get the data from the first mile, depending on where it's shipped from, then how can I say I can only make a prediction and a guess on what the CO2 output be? Because the only one that I'm really getting good data from is the last mile operator and the airline. That's basically it. On the first mile, and then also from port towards the fulfillment center, not really getting much data on the CO2 output. How much CO2 output is produced inside the fulfillment center by operating it. So it can only be predictions, and that's or estimates, and that's making it a real challenge. So at the moment, me as a CEO put that to a hold until we really have a good functional basis which I can trust to be at least 80-90% trustworthy.
That's an honest answer because it is very tricky, and it's also for consumers to buying biological food versus whatever is the standard. Well, you have to pay more to get that. Are you willing to pay more? And for sustainability, it's the same. Basically, things are getting more expensive if you're going to do it in a certain way. Are you willing to offer that price or pay that price yourself? And unfortunately, we're still in a discussion about the P&L in the end. Like, how much is it going to cost me and how much is going to return to me? And is it just purely by marketing a budget, or is it actually contributing to something bigger than yourself? And that's still a tough conversation.
Absolutely. A couple of days ago, I had a conversation on that with the regional director from DHL Express in Hungary, and he said, "Well, if you're running an express product, which is already expensive, then it's easier to make the upsell, right? They see a customer study that the majority of the guys then booking sustainable fuel for the global express shipment because it's already expensive anyway. The return rate is going down, so but then again, he said for him it's fairly easy. If speed is all that matters, then the guys are paying to pay everything, right? But more or less. But it will also have a threshold. But if it's about the price and consolidating as much as you can, then it's very tough to be shipping sustainable.
All right, I want to switch gear a little bit and talk a little bit more about you, because I know you're the CEO. I see you traveling all the time. You work from home or you work abroad, basically. How do you stay on track with your team performance? Because a lot of our clients base are also digital nomads. They live everywhere and they're sometimes solopreneurs or having a large team of 300 people. How do you stay on track with your team's performance while you are on the road or while you're managing all these things at the same time?
First and foremost, it's I'm trusting everyone that I'm working with and that I'm doing. If there's only a small line of lack of trust, then our ways will separate. I cannot have that. Second of all, we're also an IT company at the same side, right? So a technology company. So for us, it's very fairly easy. We're only operating one really real office in London. Other than that, my team is working in 6 different time zones, and that makes it easy because they're working around the clock. Basically, everyone at some point, somebody is always working. And for me, it doesn't really matter. I have my fellow board members. We're setting up a call once a month where we're executing there, addressing things, then giving the task to the team. And for me, it doesn't really matter when or from where they work, unless until they're getting the job done in due time, right? So it's and from an IT perspective, I'm really heavily relying on statistics and numbers. As long as I see those KPIs that I'm clearly addressing, then I'm fine with that. And then, different than other probably big organizations, we have the benefit of hosting events and exhibiting at third-party events. So I'm coming automatically together with the team on a regular basis somewhere in the world. Right? So that affects that different than other companies. Probably we're having way higher travel costs. But the good thing with it is you having time always to sit with the team. So what I do is I always travel in for an event 2-3 days earlier, if it's a bigger one, even if we third party exhibiting, and then the team is certain team players are doing the same, so I can have a sit down with them and brainstorming, make a full session days meetings out of it, which is great because you have nothing that disturbs you. You can really focus on the teamwork then for 2 days, and it's enormous what you're getting done in those times. Usually, it's in big hotels or resorts. So you have an optimum setup from a meeting room perspective as well. So that helps a lot. So far, knock on wood, but it's working very well.
Yeah, same. It's difficult for us. We have also 4 continents: Latin America, North America, Europe, Asia, with team members across the world. And we have our own office in Shenzhen, and we have our own warehouse space, but we don't have global offices in that sense. So we actually say, okay, if we are going to meet, make sure whenever we have an event, try to get everyone together that's nearby or relatively nearby to get that FaceTime and make sure that we schedule time to actually connect with each other on a personal level, have internal discussions, and be able to feel that you're part of something. Because that's always the difficulty when you have a remote team, is that you don't feel connected with the company that you work with. And that's something that we also really recognize in how you do it. We're doing it exactly the same way. We're always on the road pretty much, by always taking consideration, okay, where am I traveling to? And is there a chance for me to connect with the team and make sure that we are still on the same track where we're going?
And it's not for everyone, right? So last year I wanted to hire my absolute dream candidate to push shop integrations, interacting with the e-tail scene in Central Europe. And she decided not to come simply because she knew she would miss to have an office to go to interact with colleagues, etc. You really need to be the type of person and willing to work that road, right? It's I think for me it really made the difference during COVID. I recognized, okay, it is doable. I came from 180 days traveling a year down to 0, as there's so many others, and then, of course, first you think, does it work out with the family, being at home all the time? And then also the second challenge is, how do I get on without interacting with my colleagues face to face, right? But it worked out because it had to. But as much as I'm happy again now being on the road again, you need that, and you just need to concentrate your focus. And my me time, where I'm the most productive at all the days, is when I'm up in the air. That's basically when I'm really productive. I never buy that voucher, or even if they're giving it to me, I'm never connecting to the internet. I'm just getting stuff done on my MacBook, and that's it. And that really helps a lot.
Yeah, that's the quiet place. And I just wanted to say, once they start offering Wi-Fi, now it's becoming. You feel like, do I need to be online? No, you don't have to be online.
Sorry, it didn't work. That's the real time whenever your phone rings, not a single email comes in, so that you really can focus on the task that you decided to do on that flight. That's really helpful, and I do not want to change that, because that's really keep helping me getting things done in due time.
So to close up this episode, what is your dream for next?
It's pretty simple. I want to have people, when they're thinking about shipping cross-border e-commerce, they should thinking next. We want to be that first global go-to party where people, if they want to ship to another country, to another continent, to a new marketplace, they should think, I want to ship to somewhere else, and it's next.
Awesome. I think that's for us also very helpful to have Next in our network. We have clients that go in cross-border. They obviously are doing cross-border shipping from China, but they're very strong in one market, let's say the US, and they want to go to the Europe. They don't have a clear understanding. So how does it work with taxes? How does it work with this? And us being able to introduce them to experts of what they wanted to know more about is I think extremely valuable. In the end, we're all kind of like a middleman of getting people connected in the right way, because you cannot be an expert on everything. No matter the size of your company, within each company there might be an expert, but there's no one person that knows it all, and nor should there be as well.
Exactly. If you're building on your network, or if you're joining a network to be officially part of it, then basically what you do is, at the same time, you're entering into being part of a wholesaler, because in the end that's what you do, right? The only difference is that the different parts of your network are controlling different assets, and you're not just buying and selling it, but you're actually interacting with the other. But at the same time, you're acting as a wholesaler, because the combined buying power of all of them in the alliance makes it stronger than every wholesaler out there, and that's what we see at the moment, right? So we're getting those leading wholesalers for e-commerce and for air freight capacity and whatnot. They're coming to us because they see when the potential and saying, hang on a minute, if we're running the math in Europe alone, your members are already controlling, I don't know, 20% of the cross-border parcel market. Then you need to let's join forces, so that we also bring in our buying power, and we all have it together. The moment that you then also bringing in the middle leg, you don't really need to have any wholesaler anymore out there, because you're building your neutral integrator platform. That's basically it. I can only encourage people to come on board. I know it's I have to say that, of course, but no, it's important to understand that we open our arms for everyone, but not everybody can come into. We're quite strict on our vetting process, and you need to also show the capability and the vision to believe in the bigger picture to be on board. And I think that's making us and setting us apart from other trade associations or networks, or you name it. That really sets us apart from them.
Thank you so much for being on our podcast, Justice. Really appreciate your time. And I think it's a lot of value that you shared. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Simon. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Ecommerce podcast. This episode was actually about an integrated supply chain, and not just a supply chain, a cross-border supply chain. It sounds easy. It is actually much more complex, and there are a lot of stakeholders in between. Next is actually bringing all these stakeholders together into one supply chain. If you want to learn more, feel free to reach out to Justice or myself and make sure you get connected. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and see you on the next one.